Today we're going to be talking about, welcome everybody, my name is Michael Victor. I'm the head of Communications, Advocacy and Knowledge Management at the International Livestock Research Institute. Today we're really happy to have you all here to really be talking about a really important subject that I don't think most people in the climate space and even in the agriculture space really understand, and that's about rangelands and pastoralism and how important it is as a global ecosystem and a food system. We've known pastoralism for many years, and we'll hear about that as a cultural system, as a social system. But one of the things that I learned when I moved to Africa is actually what a food production system it is. In Africa, pastoralism generates anywhere between 40 to 70% of the milk and meat production in many of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Pastoralism and rangelands itself covers around 55% of the terrestrial world. And it's probably the most productive and efficient mechanism for actually raising livestock, particularly in marginal areas. In many areas of the world, as we know, also pastoralism and rangelands is the only type of farming that you can do. Most of the marginal lands, the degraded lands, cannot be used for farming. So livestock plays an important and integral role, and that's why we have such diverse pastoralist systems throughout the world and rangeland systems. Here in Brazil, we have some really interesting rangelands and extensive systems that again provide multiple purposes and benefits. It's about raising livestock, but they also improve soil fertility, they store soil carbon. There's so many benefits that people really don't understand, and I think that's what we're here today to really focus on, valuing pastoralism. This session is being run by the International Livestock Research, what I'm part of, also the International Land Coalition, SNV, Mercy Corps, GIZ, and the International Year on Rangeless and Pastoralists that we'll talk about in a second as well. So with that, I'm not going to add in any more. I'd like to invite Johanna to give us a little kind of framing discussion about the value of pastoralism, and then we'll get into a great session of panel discussion. So thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? I need to shout. My name is Johanna von Braun. I work for the International Land Coalition. We are a global network of more than 300 members, many of them constituency-based or land-based organizations. And my role is I sort of see how we, as a package, fit into the climate and nature space with a focus on land. I'm very honored to give this presentation because it really should be my colleague Natasha who's a focal point for pastoralists, and in fact I think many of the people in the audience know more about this than me, so please jump in if you feel that you want to add to anything that I'm saying. Like this. How do I do that? Okay. So ILC, so I mentioned before, we have a large land rights network. Our vision is a just and equitable and sustainable world with a focus on sustainable, on people-centered land governance. We have 26 organizations that are pastoralist organizations, and we have in many countries, about 35 countries, national land coalitions, which work on national level land reform with governments. In 10 of those, they're very actively engaging on pastoralism. And then we have 3 regional platforms that bring together pastoralist organizations in Africa, South Asia, and in Central Asia. And we're emerging one in Latin America. Now let's to rangelands. Rangelands, particularly in this COP, we focus a lot on forests. One of the reasons we want to really pay attention to this issue is because there's a vast ecosystems of rangelands out there that play a critical role in climate and food security, which don't have a lot of visibility in the climate space. So just to remind people, there are vast areas of the world that are considered rangelands. I think it's about 45% of the Earth's land, which are being stewarded by 500 million pastoralists. They're very diverse ecosystems. They're grasslands, drylands, savannas, some of them dry forests, highlands, shrublands. So as I believe over there in the previous event, they were talking about that. They're very distinct and diverse and quite different from forest ecosystems. They have a high variability and are prone to climate shocks. I mean, obviously forests are too, but very much more so, and are badly affected by climate change. Pastoral system and rangelands have co-evolved for a very long time and become mutually dependent on each other. And one of the, I mean, not all pastoralists are mobile people, but many of them are, and that's a very defining factor where we look at the health of rangelands and the importance of mobility of pastoral communities, which is why our campaign next year is really focusing on mobility as the right to mobility. The grazing of livestock across landscapes is very important, and is estimated to make the land in terms of livestock production 2 to 10 times more productive than settled livestock in sedentary environment. So this concept of sustainability and pastoralism really go hand in hand. Here's an example of some of the ecosystems that we include when we talk about rangelands. This is a slide that comes from the Global Pasture Watch of WRI, just to give credit. Now we're here to talk about the contribution to food and climate. I think we mentioned before that in terms of food, pastoralists give important for food security for millions of people. They support the livelihoods of 200 to 500 million people directly. They're incredibly important as a food supply source. As we mentioned before, in terms of protein consumption, it's incredibly important, particularly in some of the poorest communities of the world. So above all for regional and local food supply. There is a resilience and risk management. Pastoral communities are often adaptable to very variable and unpredictable environments, and with the movement of the livestock, they are able to adapt to rainfall patterns where the mobility is allowed, which can make them more resilient in terms of livestock production compared to sedentary communities. And there's an efficiency in resource use that is estimated that in terms of the food production that comes out of pastoral livestock is considered to be more effective than sedentary communities. However, there's a number of challenges, of course. Or let me first come to climate. In terms of carbon sequestration, this is something that we really want to raise awareness to in the climate space. It is estimated that rangelands hold 550 gigatons of soil carbon, which is similar to tropical forest, a little less. And while tropical forests absorb more annual carbon, like on an annual level, sequester more, their carbon is significantly more vulnerable because of the carbon is stored in tree and above ground biomass, whereas soil carbon is under the ground and less vulnerable to fires and other factors. There is methane considerations. I'm going to skip over some of that in the interest of time. Less methane production in terms of livestock. There is a prevention of land degradation that's happening for livestock movement, including biodiversity maintenance, etc. And then one of the things I really want to highlight is fire management. I think we've seen a lot of wildlife fires, and there's a correlation between pastoral movement and management of the land and the feeding of shrublands and lower area of vegetation that is significant for fire management, that has been affected badly by the reduction of mobility that we've seen. There's also, beyond food and climate, of course, important ecosystem functions that rangelands provide to up to 2 billion people who rely directly on the ecosystem services of rangelands, yet many of them go unnoticed when governments do engage in policies that affect pastoralists. and including in terms of their vulnerability to market fluctuation, climate change, expansion of agriculture, which is a huge factor in rangeland health. Now I want to, so one of the things, what are we thinking about? So one of the things that we're focusing on in our work is to look at the importance of recognizing pastoralists as climate and food champions and more, both by governments but also by donors who've really focused a lot on forests over the last, 10, 15 years. The securing of tenure is really important for pastoralist communities, but also, and linked to that, the right to mobility, which is undermined potentially even by focusing on tenure only as a stationary concept. There is more need for data in terms of the importance of the contribution that pastoralist communities provide, and of course participation in decision making. I wanted to quickly touch on the Rio Conventions. You still want me to touch on the Rio Conventions? Yeah, in terms of how, because we've done an analysis on guides to land rights in the Rio Convention, which does a quite in-depth analysis on all sorts of decisions and mentioning of land rights and related rights like FPIC and others that are included in the Rio Conventions, which was just published. And I've been thinking a little bit about, there's a lot of benefit that pastoralist communities can get out of the general increasing recognition of land rights across the Rio Conventions, which potentially a more tangible outcome because it's linked to individual targets from the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, which has very concrete targets and recognition of both local community and indigenous people's land rights, with pastoralism obviously falling in both categories. Then at the UNCCD, there is the most concrete language, and I just wanted to quickly touch on those. So in the CBD, there's a number of targets. I'm not going to go into detail of them, but they all recognize to some extent the need to participation, the need to respect indigenous peoples and local communities when it comes to conservation planning, and some of the 30 by 30 targets, which many of you will have heard about, as well as specific target on the right to land, as well as women's land rights. There's also a monitoring framework that's attached to the Global Biodiversity Framework, which has a mandatory reporting indicator on land. So governments will they'll be obliged to report back on how they're implementing the land tenure obligations through the CBD. Now, they're not reflecting on mobility, but there is strong elements of tenure that can be used. In terms of, the other thing is there's a new program of work on Article 8J, which is talking about the obligation of governments to protect traditional lifestyles, which a strong correlation can be made to pastoralism. In terms of the UNCCD, we probably see the strongest language with strong land tenure decisions since COP16. Particularly in the last COP, there was links to the VGGTs, which are probably some of the strongest frameworks for pastoralists, as well as obligations like calls, for example, for a 10-year focal point, and the global mechanism, which is essentially supposed to support parties in implementing some of the 10-year commitments for financing. There is stronger gender decisions. The most important is the new decision on rangelands and pastoralists, which recognizes them as critical allies for ecosystem protection and for the planet. There is again the link to the VGGTs, which are very positive language for pastoralists, and they also recognize the call for a greater recognition of tenure systems that are conducive to mobile communities. And they have two new caucuses that have been established for local communities and indigenous peoples. Again, you have the issue of separation, but in both, depending on how communities identify themselves, it provides a good opportunity for engagement. Then at this particular COP in the UNFCCC, The language, of course, is not great, and maybe some of you disagree, but in my mind, it's really some of the weakest language that we see. However, we've seen two big developments coming out of this particular COP, which is the expansion of the tenure and forest pledges that were originally came out of COP 26, what was it, 2021 in Glasgow, which were at that point exclusively focusing on forest-based communities. These have now been renewed and expanded to other ecosystems. So it's a really good opportunity, particularly in light of the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralism, to support and engage with donors to expand financing towards non-forest ecosystems. As well as there is a new commitment called the Intergovernmental Land Tenure Commitment, which is at this point where governments have agreed to commit 160 million additional hectares of tenure. This includes countries like Tanzania, who have obviously big rangeland ecosystems. And it also they also commit to improved laws and policies. We're hoping that with the International Year of Rangeland Pastoralism coming up next year, and COP17 in Mongolia being such an advocate for rangeland ecosystems, as well as tenure, that we can use it as a leverage point to get more rangeland countries to commit and join this particular territorial pledge, with a recognition of the right to mobility, which again is something that is sort of a little bit left out still in all of these discussions. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Hannah, and that's a really good kind of introduction and overview, and maybe something that we really need to discuss here is how do we make sure that rangelands and pastoralists are more embedded within the climate discussions? It seems like there's a real opportunity there. So with that, we're going to really jump into, we have a great panel, and I'd like to invite our panelists up. Right now we have Nelly, is she here? Great. We have Isaac. I saw Isaac, there he is, that's great. Watch out. I think, do we have Musa here? Musa from Cameroon, do we have here? We might not. You texted him? And then we have Josefina, please join us. Come on, Josefina, it'd be great.
She wants me to do it, if that's okay.
We'd be much happier with, I think it's very good also to get the Brazilian, the perspective from here. And then Lamine, come on up. And we also now have gender balance, so which is very good too. So I think it's good. And if, Rudy, if you want to say anything, of course you can say something, you know. And Deoda will bring you up later for the closing as well. We also have some great people here in the audience. Yes, Roba, if you want to come up and say something, you can definitely come up. We just have 4 seats here for right now. So we'll have you come up and say something as well. So we're really happy. So we talk about valuing rangelands and pastoralism. Just really briefly introduce who you are and give us 20 seconds on, from your perspective, what is the critical value of rangelands or pastoralism and why? So just really briefly, 1 minute. Let's just get everyone to talk quickly.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Very happy to be here. So obviously, just following on the conversation that was from the previous presentation, I think the value of rangelands is really undervalued, and there needs to be more effort to really bring out, especially the non-market value for rangelands. And that calls for a lot of effort, both in market and in non-market systems, to really understand what that holistic value of rangelands needs to be. So I do see it as the hidden gem that, especially in these climate circles, is not discussed adequately. So there is opportunity to really deep dive and see exactly what that value is. But I'm Nelly Bosibori. I'm happy to be here. I'm from Mercy Corps.
Go ahead, Isaac.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isaac Tobiko. You asked about the value of the rangelands. And
where are you from, Isaac? Can you? Yeah.
I'm from Kenya. I work with an indigenous people's organization called Naretolatia, also a member of Clan Network. And you want to know the value of the rangelands. This is the value. Do you want to see the pastoralist? This is the pastoralist. This is us. This is our livelihood. This is our social aspect. This is our economic aspect. So when you want to talk about pastoralists and rangelands, I think we need to have a very deeper understanding of what means in people's lives, rather than being a commodity that is an afterthought. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Josefina Eisel. I'm the Regional Director for the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, regional for Latin America. I'm based in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And the value for rangelands for us is we are starting to create more awareness about that. For many years, we have been discussing about deforestation and not so much about the conversion of grasslands. There are no legal frameworks that protect grasslands in many countries in Latin America at global level. So for us, it's very important. We are trying to create more awareness on the private sector and the need to conserve that area and restore it as well.
Great, thank you. And Lamine.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Lamine Diatta. I'm working for the Ministry of Environment for Senegal. So for the value of rangelands, I can say that these systems are the second life-keeping land use system after forestry. Thank you.
Do you want to say something about from your perspective? Maybe we can, Nelly, if you can just hand Roja the. Please come up for a second. Can we put an extra chair?
Oh, a chair.
Yeah, just move the chair over. Oh, that's great. So. Perfect. I didn't. Okay, great. So, yeah, from your perspective, please introduce yourself and what's the value of rangelands from your perspective?
My name is Alhassan Tahiru Jaoji. I'm a pastoralist from Nigeria representing the West Africa livestock population. For us in West Africa, rangeland is the first. It's not like he said the second. No, it's the first in West Africa. Because largely West Africa is Sahel and desert on one side, and then the other side is the rangeland. So ours is, we can say, is on top of the forests.
Okay, great. Excellent. So, Nelly, can you kind of, we'll go into a kind of a round to have each of the different panelists just kind of discuss some of their own experiences from their perspective, and then we'll open it up to questions as well. So, Nelly, from your perspective, really, how do you see the economic value, of kind of, from your perspective in Mercy Corps, what is the economic value of rangelands, and how are you working on that in Mercy Corps, and what are some of the promising practices that you see?
Sure, thanks, Michael. So we are currently working in about 9 counties in the arid and semi-arid lands of Kenya, which really gives us the opportunity to really understand these pastoral systems at the local level, at the pastoralist level. And we are seeing, in terms of the economic value, we are currently having a couple of programs, but the signals are consistent. The pastoralists are willing to, in terms of the investment side of things, the pastoralists are willing to add more money to be able to have sustainable systems that support water systems and also pasture production. And this is based off the premise that globally there's data that indicates that for every dollar invested in rangeland management systems, these systems are able to repay back themselves the investments, and the values range between $4 to $35. So from an investment perspective and from an economic value, this is a very compelling figure that then should provide that clarity and confidence for other investors who are interested in this space to really hone in on these systems. So some of the projects that we are currently implementing, we are working with pastoralists that, working on different types of interventions. But what is really working is having a system that combines both fodder production, livestock production. Water is a key element in those systems as well. In terms of the policy side, we do see opportunities, especially in the climate, UNFCCC spaces, the national adaptation plans. There's still a huge gap in terms of covering pastoral systems. especially on the mobility side. I think there's still a big gap in terms of recognizing mobility as an adaptation strategy for rangelands. So we do see that the NAPs, of course, are country-specific. They do have a couple of projects or interventions within countries, but if you are to address pastoralism, especially at a regional level, you need to look into regional cross-border interventions, which the national adaptation plans currently don't work. So for us, as Marsico, this is an area of intervention that we are working on critically, working closely with the ministries and the county government to see how we can elevate really the value of pastoralism across to go beyond counties, to go beyond the national borders, all the way to the regional scale. And really, at the UNFCCC level, that means engaging with the various financing systems like the GEF and GCF to really have a window to plan for regional intervention for pastoralists, because that's the only way you can be able to especially sustain the ecosystem services that go beyond national borders. But yeah, in terms of the funding, about only 3% of the global adaptation funds reach pastoralists, less than 3%. This is a worrying figure, especially given the value and the potential that pastoralist systems have to contribute to national and regional economies. So a big gap in terms of the funding streams and financial flows from the global funds all the way to the national and local communities, but also big gaps on the policy side as well, which could, if there's interventions put in these spaces, then that gives the enabling environment to be able to scale up some of the interventions that we have seen are working at the local pastoralist level. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think there's also hope in that there's already successful stories that we've seen through our interventions.
Great, thank you very much. Isaac, just moving to you and what you've heard, especially from your perspective as a pastoralist as well, what is the importance of land tenure, both for yourself and community land tenure, for kind of climate action and for kind of resilience and adaptation from the work that you're doing as well? And can you give some examples of land tenure and how that's helping you to manage the land and for climate action and for adaptation?
Thank you so much. Just first to step back a little bit is post-Glasgow to Belém. This is the part time that we are discussing about pastoralism more in-depthly. I think that's an injustice that we need to start calling out earlier before we even proceed with my presentation. So that's an injustice, and it's good that it's being corrected. Pastoralists are not, I've heard somebody commenting that pastoralists will contribute to something. Pastoralists will not contribute to something. Pastoralists have already and have been part of these and national and international indicators with the food systems. Also, there's no pastoralism without secure land tenure. And for us, our mobility and being able to reach out to greener and better pastures is what supports our food systems. And one key example is the land percentage that the pastoralists occupy, even in Kenya. More than 45% of Kenya's land is held by pastoralists. But there's an argument that pastoralist land is idle land. And it makes them very, very ideal for land grabs. It makes it ideal for even carbon credit projects. And I think secure land tenure where pastoralists are able to have free mobility, being able to control and use their land is key to a secure food system. And looking at what does pastoralists contribute, if you look at the food, the milk and fodder value chains in Kenya, really it's quite high because pastoralists really grow their food in a more ethical way. We are able to contribute to the national indicators in a more ethical manner. However, because of policy and practices that are there, I think through this current discussion that we are having, I think policy discussions should be also on how do we protect indigenous people's territories, because I'm really keen on territories, because land can be really, it can really confide. When I say territories, it's even cross-border territories, where pastoralists can be able to kind of have more control, but policies should be able to support that. Even for the Kenyans that are here, even the titling system really has really, have really curtailed the pastoral ways of life, even in our own spaces. So sometimes policy decisions, policy directions really needs to have. And also there will be no forests, because I know people have talked about forests. Someone told me about there will be no forests if there will be no rangelands. So these are interdependent relationships where all of us can be able to win if all of us are taken care of. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. And again, this is really important, the whole idea of tenure and what that means. Josefina, can you tell us a bit, kind of, you've heard of, we have a heavy African contingent here. So maybe can you talk a little bit about rangelands in the context of Latin America and what are some of the key issues? But also, what's the role of the private sector and how you're supporting sustainability, how you're supporting communities or rangeland managers to actually manage the land, and what's the role of the private sector in this as well?
Sure. Yeah, well, for Latin America, pastoralism is not a common practice, but we have a lot of rangelands, a great area. The way that beef produces mainly pasture-based, so we depend on either native grasslands or planted grasses, but for us, the conservation of those species are very important. I think, as I said before, there is not enough awareness of the environmental value that has. There are not enough protection on laws in many countries. In my country, in Argentina, there is not a legal framework to protect grasslands, but there is to forests, so I think that's something. In Brazil, it's different. Maybe in Brazil, the Cerrado is protected. There are environmental laws, but sometimes land tenure, the recognition, the bureaucracy that the farmers need to go through just to follow the land tenure is also very important, just something to tackle. These farmers don't have land titles, and that complicates the whole supply chain transparency and traceability. Also, there is a lot of lack of funding. Many of the organizations that are related with us, like the Grasslands Alliance, they are facing a huge problem with lack of funding, so the investment that needs to take to conserve the grasslands or the rangelands that we have in Latin America is also a big concern. And I think that also has to do with the lack of awareness on the environmental importance that has. Also, sometimes the lack of tools to monitor the conversion of native grasslands. Sometimes the tools that are most commonly used in the region are just for forests, but when you want to have a GIS tool just to monitor the conversion of native grasslands or rangelands, the tools are not good enough to identify the conversion, if it is to crops or to grasses, so we lack enough tools to monitor, or also good databases. There's a new development of Probioma from a NGO, but there's still a lot of need to have better databases to understand the real problem and which are the solutions to tackle those problems. So there's a lot being done, but we need more funding, more awareness, a more legal framework to support all this work. And that comes also with the private sector question that you said. Without awareness, without kind of public-private coalitions to do this, the private sector is just not doing enough, maybe more on the deforestation issues and traceability.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Lamine, can you, you're working on the negotiations, and you also work at the Ministry of Environment, which is interesting. So it's not the Ministry of Livestock. How are you working cross ministries, ministerial, between the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Livestock, and others to really kind of support pastoralism? And how do you do that? And where do you see, also it'd be interesting to hear where you see some of the negotiations going, and where does pastoralism fit in?
Yes, thank you so much. I think livestock is one of the most important economic sector in Senegal. And in the early years, we have adopted some very interesting options for livestock. It's like 1/3 of the country area is just secured and protected as silver pastoral zone. It's just reserved for livestock systems. We can allow sometimes some crop there, but the main land use system is livestock systems. So that is very important, and the government is investing a lot in this area to secure the livestock system. So it is very important. But livestock is a cross-cutting area. If we need to keep livestock, we need to work with agriculture, with fisheries, with water, and others. And now we have adopted since 2004 one agro-silver pastoral and fisheries, what we call like framework law. And that law is adopted to build some coherence in the land use systems, but also to see how those cross-cutting issues can be dealt in a coherent manner to optimize the land use. And that helps a lot and bring together the agricultural ministry, environment ministry, livestock, and also fisheries, among us the private sector and the civil society and the agro, how can I say it, the producers together to work to see how they can plan action together, how they can complement themselves, and how they can also look at what is happening on the livestock systems and the other systems to build this kind of sustainable development for the whole land use system. And that is working. Now we are working to revise, because 20 years after adopting this law, we are doing some kind of stack talking and to see what has worked, what is not working, and how we can improve in the future. Now we are just supported by the research department also to see how we can, with FAO, how we can improve such kind of work. And livestock also is like the missing sector in the climate finance system, because at the climate area we are seeing livestock like a big contributor to the emission. This is due to a misreporting, because when you see livestock in mitigation, according to the IPCC inventory system, we focus on the animals and not in the system globally. So in the system, we say there is emission from enteric fermentation, emission from manure management, but in Senegal and in Sahel in the system, livestock is combined with forestry management. So if you consider the best practices in the forestry area, we know that the system is sequestering more carbon than emitting. And that is a game changer. We need now to change the narrative to draw more finance in the livestock system. Now I think livestock is accounting less than 1% of the global climate finance. And due to this like a misunderstanding. And we have conducted a lot of studies with one project, we call it the CASEX project, showing that if we consider the best practices, we can reduce fire in the livestock system, and we can increase the carbon sequestration with a lot of core benefits in terms of reducing hunger, in terms of creating new jobs. And also, we have such kind of agroforestry system in Senegal land we call the agroforestry parklands, and we cannot have those parklands without livestock, because livestock is the one spreading seeds in the forest area, but bringing those seeds in the cropland system to build those agroforestry system with a lot of high carbon sequestration. So in the climate negotiation, livestock is still like a conflicting area when it's come to deal with livestock. But during the Coronavia, we fight it a lot to have a specific workshop in the livestock system. And that showed that, like, yes, there is no one system, depending to the continents, depending to, even in one continent, we can have a lot of livestock systems. But what we can just retain from that workshop, it was that livestock management systems are highly vulnerable to climate change. They are contributors, but they have also a high potential to contribute to climate mitigation and climate adaptation while dealing with other core benefits. So in this COP also, we have in the paper something relating to the livestock system, and now bringing this understanding that when we deal with livestock in climate finance, not only focus on the mitigation side, we can go through the systemic approaches, and we can also deal with the adaptation as well as the SDGs in the livestock sector. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Al-Hassan, do you have something you want to contribute from Nigeria and some of the challenges and opportunities that you see?
Yeah. What I want to add is that in the whole of West Africa, Nigeria has the biggest livestock consumption because we also have the highest human population. We are about 230 million people, but we don't import beef from outside. But it's these pastoralists that provide the beef that is sustaining these 250 million people. So we see that the economic value of livestock in the Sahel and also, say, in West Africa is highly undervalued because we don't have data. Even if you go to the FAO, you want to say, okay, what is the quantum of trade in a typical international market in Nigeria? How much is the trade worth? What is the contribution, or what is the magnitude of the transaction? You will not find it because that data is missing. So if we want to really project the pastoralism in a positive perspective, we have to look for this data and also make it public, to the international audience, so that they will now see what pastoralism is doing. Because the conversations in the space is that pastoralism is contributing to methane emission. But they are not looking at, say, okay, if they are contributing to the methane emission, what are the positive contributions of this livestock in the climate and also in the ecosystem? It is not there. What is the contribution of this pastoralism system to the economy of nations? I mean, from the villages to the national GDP. I know pastoralism contributes about 40% of agricultural products in Nigeria alone. And it's sustaining almost 20 million people in Nigeria along the value chain, be it in the dairy value chain or in the beef value chain, or even in the agricultural value chain, because many cannot afford fossil fuel to power their tractors. So they are using these bulls, to cultivate their lands. So we see this, there is no link. Actually, when we are talking at this level, there is no link between the contribution of the pastoralism a way of life and the climate itself. There's a missing link. We need to really bring the conversation closer to say, okay, how many liters of diesel or petrol is safe by using these animals to plow the land? We are not even quantifying that, and we are not factoring it into our own calculations. The other thing is even the issue of the resistance, to drought and shortage of water. Pastoralism, pastoralists, they have adopted a system. I know in a state in Nigeria that cows, they take water once in 2 days, and which is not normal. But they have adapted to it, and they are surviving. And so we see that the positive sides of pastoralism is not really reflected in conversations when we are talking about climate financing, as my brother is talking about. We don't know. Maybe it is done elsewhere, maybe in East Africa. But in West Africa, I'm not aware there is any climate financing that can relate it to pastoralism. I think it's like we are overlooking the space itself. The other aspect is that, as he said, when you move animals from one location to another, you are improving biodiversity, and you are allowing the space, to regenerate. And by the time you come back, the manure that is dropped by these animals will also facilitate, insects, fauna and flora within those spaces. But these are things that have not been investigated and also documented, so that we now use it as an argument when we want to discuss. Because here, people are talking about data. What data are you providing so that you support your argument? If we don't have it, it's just like a talk show. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the floor to the... Yes, please go ahead, Maria. And if you have some questions, just line up over here, and so you can speak into the microphone. Yeah, because I don't know, it's not a portable mic, so you need to come over here, And maybe just if you have questions or comments, Musa, if you want to say something, you can come up and say something as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for the conversation. Lovely listening to you and learning so much. So you mentioned many times the lack of funding. Have you explored, or what's your view in relation to connecting this work to carbon markets? Is there an opportunity in there? And we have been saying that the connection between pastoralism and climate is not there, there's lack of data. But do you see an opportunity in the future to get resources from the carbon markets?
Yeah, actually, most of the funding is through that. When we try to identify case studies or projects, how do they get paid back? Also, the sustainability of the project is through the carbon market. So the project where they do kind of this different grazing practice, like rotational grazing, adaptive grazing, they usually end up, it's not easy, but the ones that manage to emit carbon credits, they are the ones that are paying back the investment with carbon credits. So it's linked, but not every single project can emit the credits. But there is some funding going through that, but not enough, not through the community, not from the private sector. The supply chain is not investing yet enough on conserving.
Yeah, go ahead. Isaac?
You just mentioned a very emotive part of carbon markets. I think carbon markets for pastoralist communities is very disruptive. Let's start from there, because carbon markets brings about and the economic and gains for individuals and kills away the social fabric on how pastoralism works. Pastoralism basically means you have to be a social community to be able to move to the next community. You can be able to get grass, fodder, and there are no cost implications to that. So when carbon credits comes into our own communities, what they basically do is they monetize the process. They have what you call the deliverables of the project. What happens is then people start being individualistic and they kill the social part of pastoralism. Two is the new frontier by both private and public entities are coming in to grab land in indigenous people's territories through the pretext of carbon markets and carbon trading. So for us, and these are first-hand experiences, that carbon credits are really disruptive in our communities and land has been grabbed. And somebody had also mentioned about financing. I think for the longest, pastoralist territories and pastoralist food systems have not really gotten the right kind of funding. And actually some have not even gotten funding at all. Because first is, where is the data? What is the basis of funding pastoralists and pastoralist territories? It's because there's been a very huge gap of data. And for those that even have attempted to get data, have not really gotten the data. We must have citizen driven data with also indigenous knowledge part of it. There's nothing for us without us. And the biggest aspect is one common Maasai says is memanyayo meleno. Basically it tells you cannot move to the next if you've not checked it out. So if you have not checked it out as an indigenous person and you've not gotten the data, then you cannot move. So for us, we believe that indigenous peoples led data for us, with us, then that's the best way to finance our indigenous people's food systems. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, interesting. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you for that, and I agree that carbon markets are very disruptive. I think they are also going to be very disrupted by the requirement for permanence, and I would be really cautious when you're looking at carbon markets because if you don't have permanence, and that can come back to bite you in the long term. One of the things I missed in all of the discussion was wildlife and the role of mobility, because it's mobility that makes pastoralism what it is, right? And without mobility, you will see degradation. And this, so my experience is really from Southern Africa. Namibia lost half of its grazing land, 50 million hectares of grazing land, because they enclosed it. They stopped the mobility, and it is now encroached with camel thorn. Botswana lost 60,000 wildebeest in 1 year because they put up a cordon fence to stop livestock getting foot and mouth disease. So the interactions between wildlife and livestock are hugely important, and they actually strengthen each other. So we see the most biodiverse systems where livestock and wildlife can interact and where they're grazing together. But what privatization, what land grabs, what wildlife preserves do is that they actually stop that mobility. And we see in both Namibia and Botswana, the creation of permanent water points for wildlife are actually causing degradation because they remove that mobility. So I would emphasize that role of mobility and the importance of interactions between wildlife and livestock.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. We have one more intervention and comment or question, whatever you...
Thank you so much. My name is Tunda. I am an indigenous Maasai woman from Narok, Kenya. And I really want to appreciate the contributions that have been given here, and thinking about what the declaration on the UN DRIP on rights of indigenous people on direct access, indigenous governance, flexibility and trust, participatory accountability, equity and inclusion, alignment with local processes. I think I can, as a pastoralist woman, I can see that there's still a very big gap and also a lot of discrimination. And as a woman also, and also I want to speak on behalf of the youth, there's also that lack of inclusivity of the women and recognition of the role of the indigenous women in the pastoralist territories in making sure that our lands are protected, and like in the Maasai, mostly the cows move, but the women are left with the children, and the goats and the sheep don't move as much as the cows move. So we are left with this, and it is the role of the woman to make sure that the family continues to exist, and we rely on this. On this kind of ways. Therefore, I would want to say that if we are thinking about also financing indigenous pastoralists, I think it's also good that we look at the role of the woman in all this, so that we make sure that the women are included. We can uphold self-determination. We can make sure that we protect our territories are protected. And as my brother has mentioned, that if there wouldn't be rangelands, there is no forest without rangelands, because if we do not protect the rangelands, then the pastoralists will move to the forest. Then we won't have the forest either. So we are going to lose it all as we most probably system are looking more into preserving the forest and stuff like that. And I agree with both my brothers here about the carbon thing, because it's also something that we don't really understand, and nobody has taken time also to explain what are these carbon credits, how is this sequencing happening. And because when they come to our lands, they say we are selling air. How do you sell air? We would love to understand what is this air that is being sold and how is it being sold. And of course, we make sure that there is that human dignity, the integrity of indigenous peoples is upheld and respected. Thank you so much.
Great. Really like that intervention. Thank you. Just to let you know, in terms of the carbon markets, I think it's a really interesting issue, and very, really interesting that it's not just a quick solution. But we do have a paper from Todd Crane on carbon markets and livestock, so something that just came out and we can share with you. Did you want to say something? Musa, do you want to say something very quickly? And then we're going to have one last intervention, quick intervention from each person, and I'll let you know about that. But Musa, if you want to say something, please go ahead. Sorry that we weren't able to.
Okay, thank you. I did not actually plan for this, but as a pastoralist, and we are talking about rangelands and pastoralism, let me chip in one or two things. The two things I want to say, first of all, is that as we understand, there is a historic injustice since the way African economy is planned in its generality. For example, let me take an example. He's from Kenya. I'm a Mbororo from Cameroon. We are livestock-based economic. But, you know, the African economy, the way it is planned, is a crop-based economy. It's export to feed the Western world. Is not an economy that was based to valorize African food system in general. For example, the coffee or the tea in Kenya is more value than the livestock in Kenya because the livestock, the rangelands, are not recognized as a territorial land for indigenous people of Kenya or neither in Cameroon or no in my brother in Nigeria. So without recognizing the territorial right of indigenous land, the rangelands, for example, you know, occupied more than 54% globally. In Africa, it's the same, but it's the most neglected in terms of development because the development orientation is towards cash crop to export to feed the West. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
That's it. So the thing I want to say is that all of us are in this place. I thank the panelists for their discussion, and I think ILC and other international organizations has fought hard to have the United Nations declare the international year of rangelands and pastoralism, which is kicking up into 2026. So my appeal or recommendation is that we should capitalize on this to actually bring the contribution of rangelands and pastoralists on climate space, and so that what are the contributions do we contribute to the world? What are the contributions does the pastoralists and livestock bring, rather than making us always become a victim, but we are sometimes a solution providers.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great. And actually, what you said right there, moving into the International Year of Pastoralism, if everyone can just give me 15, 20 seconds at the most, what's the one thing that we need to do going into next year when we have all three Rio conventions coming up and the International Year of Pastoralists? What's one recommendation and what's one action that we need to take? So Lamine, starting with you, what do you think? What's the most important critical things moving forward that we need to do very quickly?
Yes, I think we need to draw more climate finance for livestock systems.
Okay. And maybe not carbon markets, but some climate financing. We need to find new ones. Go ahead.
For us, we are starting to collaborate with similar organizations that are working on the beef area or livestock area and trying to bring a unified voice with a clear next step and action agenda. Just
Commercialization as well. It's not just a cultural thing. How do we get financing in there? Go ahead.
For the YRP, for me as a pastoralist, we want to go to that platform with a collective voice also, we just don't attend, but we attend with strategy to ensure that this time round our voices are very clear and it's heard.
Great.
Thank you. So I think there's a low-hanging fruit in terms of really strengthening the local governance structures for pastoralist systems, because this enables the pastoralists to already access financing and even just investments with nationally, domestically, but also really lobbying for policy strengthening in terms of elevating the value of rangelands in national, domestic, regional economic systems.
Excellent. Keep it local. That's great.
Thank you very
Hussein.
much. My takeaway, or what I want to suggest, just 2 key points quickly. One is the issue of developing a policy that would reduce the risk in the pastoralist space. For crops, if your crop is damaged, you'll be paid kind of a compensation, or you have something like an insurance cover. But for pastoralists, you lose 50 cows, you are on your own. No, the risk is not reduced by government or any organization. Then the other one is for us also to see what to bring clearly to the table, our pastoralism contribution, to all the discussions about climate, grassland, and what. We should have a common voice, to say this is what we are contributing. We don't need somebody to say this is what we are contributing, but we can go and say this is our own contribution. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, panel. Let's give you guys a round of applause. And I'd like to bring up for some closing remarks, talking about finance. What is the Islamic Development Bank doing here as well, and how are they financing pastoralism? But I'd like to bring up Deoda Diata from the Islamic Development Bank to close us off and say some remarks.
Thank you, and very interesting discussions that I heard today. I am more of a climate change background, but I learned a lot when it comes to issues related to pastoralism. And at the Islamic Development Bank, we have been financing projects and programs that are dealing with the issue of pastoralism in the Sahel, looking at not only the ecosystem restoration, but also looking at the whole value chain of livestock. So really, we can take from this discussion today that pastoralists and rangelands are not marginal actors when it comes to our food systems. They are central to resilience, climate action, and sustainable growth. Rangelands cover more than half of the world land surface, and pastoralists manage most of these landscapes. These traditional practices, such as rotational grazing, regenerative land use, and community stewardship, are proven climate-smart solutions that sustain ecosystems and conserve biodiversity. So we have heard today that pastoralism is vital to food security, nutrition, and livelihoods. Beyond food, pastoralism provides cultural identity, social cohesion, and resilience against shocks. So the Islamic Development Bank has recently approved the Africa Livestock Resilience Program framework, which will help promote sustainable livestock value chains that enhance resilience and create economic opportunities. So the acronym is ALRP. I will get there. So the ALRP views livestock not as a subsector, but as a cornerstone of livelihoods and nutrition. Its focus on raising productivity, strengthening institutions, and expanding access to finance aligns closely with the climate-smart practices pastoralists have long championed. We are also finalizing right now the drafting of our environmental and social safeguards, and I encourage you to go to our website to have a look at it, because land is at the center of conflicts when it comes to these issues, and we have established a strong framework to make sure that no one is left behind. So one of the defining future of the ALRP is a dual focus on climate adaptation and mitigation, from improved feed and disease prevention to renewable energy in livestock processing and low emission technologies. So these measures ensure productivity gains while preserving ecological balance. So of course, partnerships with governments, regional bodies, and the actors, the communities, international institutions are key to mobilizing resources and scaling innovations. But above all, the pastoralists themselves must be recognized as equal partners in this process. So as we close, we want to commit to bringing pastoralism from the periphery of policy and finance into the center of climate action and food system transformation. By valuing pastoralists and integrating their knowledge into programs like the ALRP, we can build resilient, inclusive, and sustainable livestock systems that honor them and as agents of change. Thank you. Bon, je prends, c'est pas grave.